This is the oak that I'm harvesting the bark from to use as a tannin for my deer hide. As you can see, it has pointy leaf tips. That means it's in the red oak family. I believe this is a red oak, but really I think any oak will work. As you can see, we've got some snow. This is December 1st, 2010 in southern Michigan. But all I did is I used this roughneck utility bar and a ball peen hammer. You should wear safety glasses and you should wear hearing protection if you're going to do this method. You really shouldn't be hitting steel on steel because it can shatter. So I brought a nice heavy rubber mallet today. Ideally a wood mallet would be best, but I'm gonna give this rubber mallet a try, see if it works any better. I just go down until I hit the wood, which is white, and then I just start driving it along. But you can see that strips that bark right off fairly easy. And you can get big 1 foot to 3 foot long sections in just a matter of seconds. This white is the actual wood. The orange and yellow is what you want for the tannins, and then you have the outside bark. This is the mid section of the tree, about 1/2 to 2/3 of the way up the tree. The outer bark is thinner here, but the inner bark, which is what you want for the tannins, is quite thick. If you get out onto the smaller branches, the outer bark is real thin, but so is the inner bark. And if you get down to the main trunk, the outer bark is real thick, and the inner bark is only a little bit thicker than in the central portion of the tree. So since I'm leaving the bark on, I'm going to try and harvest all my bark from the central portion of the tree, where the outer bark is thinner, and then that way I'll get more tannin, a better tannin per chunk ratio. That's just a term I made up. And if you fill up a 5-gallon bucket and stuff it down tight, that'll be about 15 pounds of bark, and that's about what you need to do one average sized deer hide. I'm gonna go ahead and speed this along, and you can see how it develops. So anyway, as you can see, that goes fairly quick. I just stripped off about a, I don't know, maybe a 2 square foot section. So there's a couple pounds of bark in about 10 minutes, I think. So, you know, to get 20 pounds of bark, it's going to take you maybe an hour, maybe more, maybe less. One thing that helps, if the wood you're working with is at or below waist level, it's a lot less tiring on you. I'm just working with a tree that's out in the wilderness, and this is up about chest high, so it's a little strenuous. I'm sure that tanneries and stuff were set up to do this much better, but I'm not a tannery and I'm not a lumber mill. I'm just a guy out in the woods enjoying the first snow of the season. And in doing so, harvesting some bark to tan and preserve the skin from the deer I harvested. I just want to give you a close-up of the bark on the tree so that you can see what you're going after. If you look, I mean, here you can see the outer bark, which is gray or black or whatever, and this orange yellow band is the inner bark that you're after. And you can see that will actually stain your hands brown. That's what you want. And if you go in further, you get to the white wood. This is the actual oak wood. And what I try to do is shave off a thin layer of the wood along with the inner and outer bark. That way I know I'm getting all of the tannin. I mean, here you can see I left a nice big gob of the inner bark all the way down through here. So I'm just going to go back through and shave that off and get that till I'm right down to the wood. It's not rocket science, but I think it's helpful just for somebody that really doesn't know what's going on or doesn't know much about trees or anything and is wanting to try this, to give you a good close look up of what you're dealing with and what the goal is. Well, there you go, another hour and a half and another 5-gallon pail full of oak bark. I figured I'd mention that you don't have to resort to oak as your only means of tannin for tanning deer hides and such. There's a great many plants and trees that have high concentrations of tannin. Alder, hemlock, birch, even sumac leaves can be used. Each type of plant and tannin lends itself to different qualities of leather. I kind of lucked out finding this recently fallen oak, because if this tree sits for I would think any more than probably a couple months, all the tannins will leach out of it. I'm assuming this tree has been fell for about 2 months, somewhere between 1 and 2 months, and it's still full of tannins and quite useful. But I'm gonna wrap it up and get back to the house and boil this up and make some bark liquor. This is my bark boiling. This is red oak bark. I took 10 pounds of red oak bark and shredded it up real good and put it in this 5 to 6 gallon pot and added 3 gallons of water to it. And now I'm just letting it boil. You want to let it boil for an hour minimum, and pour that water off, and that will be your first pour. And then you add another 3 gallons of water and boil it for another hour, and that's where I'm at right now. This is my second pour. And then you add another 3 gallons of water and boil that for 1 hour minimum, and that will be your third pour. And your third pour, you split 50-50 with water to dilute it, and that's what you start your tan with. And then you slowly increase the concentration to the higher tannin. You move on to your second pour, and then you finish finally with your first pour until it strikes through. It's important that you start out with a weak tannin solution to begin with, because you can get what's called case hardening, where the large tannin particles bind to the outside of the skin and they don't allow any more tannins to enter into the center of the skin. So if you start out with a weak solution, it has time for those tannins to work through and get all the way to the center. This process is going to go on for, once I get this boiled and I start the actual tanning process, it's going to go on for, it could be up to 60 days, it could be as short as 10 days. It all depends on the thickness of the skin and other factors, the type of bark you use and stuff. So we'll see how it goes. But there it is. This second pot is what I'm using to preheat my water, so that I can pour that off, and then I can pour this heated water right back in on the bark and speed the process along. I'm using gallon milk jugs and ice cream pails and 5-gallon buckets to store my bark liquor in. As you can see, it steams things up quite a bit. So if you have the opportunity to do this outside, I would recommend doing it outside. I don't have that opportunity. I figured I'd just give you a real quick shot of the different pourings of the bark liquor. On the far right is the first pouring, which is the darkest and is used last. Next to it is the second pouring, which is a little bit lighter and is used second to last. And that one right there in the center is the first pouring, or I'm sorry, the third pouring. And it is used first, but is typically diluted 50%. And this here on the end is basically when I was finished with my first, second, and third pouring, which were all boiled for an hour plus. I took the bark while it was still boiling hot, poured it into a 5-gallon bucket, and filled that bucket up with hot water that wasn't boiling, just plain hot. And that has sat for about an hour. And I just figured I'd do that just to see if it darkens up. But there you go. First pouring, second pouring, third pouring. Give you an idea of the different amount of tannins you get with each pouring.